Now, while yes, Absolute Flash has been one of the more confusing and mysterious Absolute titles, right up there with the Martian Manhunter one and Absolute Green Lantern, but here we finally get more information on some of the more interesting parts of the story, in my opinion. Barry Allen and the entire energy non-Speed Force thing that powers Wally West, this Absolute Flash in the first place. Now, because this part focuses more on Barry Allen, his backstory and previous past, his life, and his eventual death coming up, we pick up years ago in the past. Before Barry was a scientist researching horrors beyond comprehension, he was a university professor teaching classes in Keystone City. And in his class here, you might see a familiar face that we have seen before. Yes, it is Eleanor Thawne. And no, we go to find out that she isn't just like a gender-swapped version of Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash, but instead here in this universe, this Absolute universe, she is his granddaughter. But don't get it twisted, Eobard Thawne will become incredibly important in just a second. But here she essentially goes on to confront Barry and tell him that he's not only wasting his time, but his talents working here and teaching at this school when he is destined to become and do much, much more. As she goes on to say, give me one day of your life and I promise to show you things you've only ever dreamed possible. And with an enticing offer like that, like, come on, who can really say no? In which Barry, of course, agrees and goes. And if you've been following along this Absolute Flash series so far, you know just the amount of extreme stuff Barry has been getting into and researching and doing for the military here at this base throughout this entire thing. But that's not the focus of that here. Here, it's actually the focus of how it all began and how it relates to Eobard Thawne. But if you do want to get caught up, I'll leave a link in the description and in the comments below. Eobard Thawne, her grandfather, was a man of incredible achievements, though he was essentially erased from history of what he found, because as she goes on to say, Eobard was in charge of something called Blue Trinity. During the height of World War II, of course, the US government wanted more weapons, and while they also had, Oppenheimer and the nukes and all of that, they also commissioned another secret operative in the background, something called Blue Trinity. Now, yes, as you may have guessed, this classified project was led by Eobard Thawne, who claimed to be on the verge of making contact with another dimension full of living energy, pure. Which at face value sounds like the Speed Force, right? The Speed Force in the main DC universe, or multiverse, omniverse, whatever you want to call it, essentially is living energy. It has a will of its own, almost. One of the foundations of what makes life possible in the DC multiverse. Yet here in the Absolute universe, with it being shut off and completely dominated by Darkseid's will, he made sure the Speed Force or any other third-party force with its own will and goals didn't penetrate and didn't come through. Yet something else took its place. And to find out what, he didn't just use science, no. His methods reached far beyond that, far into the supernatural, if you will. Of course, once the US government caught wind of this and Eobard Thawne doing more unsavory methods to push his theories to the test, they of course shut him down. Though Eobard has spent his life dedicated to this work, so he just refused to stop. Because as Eleanor goes on to say, as some of his work journals from the time, he describes a voice that was calling out to him from this other world of pure living energy, and the line between a genius and madness is very fine and thin. It would have been very easy just to dismiss all of her grandfather's actions due to him just being crazy and mad and not fully sane. But what happened next, what he found and what he eventually discovered justified everything. And here at this point is where things get really interesting, though at the same time kind of confusing and not fully explained as to what's going on as we move back in the past with not only Eobard Thawne in the flesh, but also Jay Garrick, who at this point they both know each other, who each of them in the main DC universe become different speedsters in their own right. Jay Garrick, the original Flash, and Eobard Thawne, one of the reverse Flashes. Here, though, it seems like they were colleagues of sort. But at this point, of course, the government shutting down Eobard Thawne and all of his working, Jay Garrick is confused as to what is he doing here in the middle of nowhere, still continuing said work, saying none of this has been authorized. Eobard going on to say, don't you see, Jay, we're about to bear witness to history. I've finally done it, showing him the reality of what the Project Blue Trinity was for this entire time, as we see just a ball of living energy, crackling like it has a mind of its own. And yes, as you can see, this energy here is the same thing that's kind of over Wally currently as when he is the Flash and using his abilities, so of course they're connected. Though we are going to see why and how a little bit later. For now, though, we see that this living energy isn't just energy or a source of power, but it also acts and has other properties, as it seems to open a portal to some other land. Of course, even Eobard, once again, hinting that this source of power to this energy relates to God in this universe, aka Darkseid. Jay Garrick, though, obviously wants no part in whatever freaky, weird stuff going on here, so he tries to shut it down. Of course, Eobard Thawne, not wanting someone to just stop his entire life's work, says, I've come too far, and literally pushes Jay Garrick into this mass energy, almost atomizing him on the spot as the energy just completely dissolves him, causing the entire machine to explode and expel the same energy outward, consuming Eobard as well. And from that point forward, he was never seen or heard from again, assumingly he was dissolved and integrated the same way Jay was. Now back into the present. Well, I mean, not really the present, as currently Barry is dead, but back into the moment Eleanor was showing Barry all of her father's work and the months she has spent recreating it and trying to fill in the blanks. Barry just goes on to say, you know, this is ridiculous and it's all wrong, erasing all of the information and equations with his hands on the chalkboard. Of course, Barry thinking that he can do it better, he's smarter, he can crack this code and finally figure out whatever Eobard is trying to find and discoveries he has made. And even though this goes on for 2 years, Barry working non-stop and trying his hardest to fully realize his plan, it seems like the government still, even in this day and age, doesn't want to explore and find answers just for the sake of exploration, but the US government wants weapons, something tangible and that they can use, which of course makes Barry mad. You know, he didn't sign up to produce weapons or fund and research that kind of stuff. He came here for the progress of science. Yet in the real world, in reality, everything comes at a cost, as Eleanor even goes on to say, this is how we continue to get the funding we need to complete our work. What we are doing here so far is beyond what the government can even comprehend, so we just need to give them a few new toys, and in return they'll give us the funding so we can change history. That seems like a pretty small price to pay, because not only is Barry finished working on the machine that allowed them to open the energy back, but they are even so close to sending in an actual team of humans into it, onto the other side, to see what truly lies beyond what her grandfather died trying to figure out. But Eleanor once more goes on to change her plan, saying that, you know, Barry can't lead this expedition team, it's too dangerous. What if he dies, or on the other side it's hazardous for humans? As she goes on to say, you know what happened to my grandfather, it's too dangerous, Barry, and you are far too important to lose, so you'll just lead the team remotely from here. Barry goes on to try and retort, saying the equipment here at this base is far more advanced than whatever your grandfather used, so the protective suits and gear will work. Eleanor again just says that no, once we're sure of that, then we can both go in together, which this moment here kind of hints that there's more going on than just colleagues collaborating on this project, which if that is true and that is the case, I can only imagine what the mainline version of Barry would think of this, a version of himself getting with a descendant of Thawne, the one man who has ruined his life more than anybody else. Side note as well, in this universe here, Barry's mother is actually still alive. Earlier, before all of this, he was on the phone talking to her. Now for here, that doesn't really change too much, but you know, I just thought I'd throw it out there. And unsurprisingly, with the genius of Barry Allen, they are eventually able to recreate it. The same science, the same machinery to allow them to tap into the same energy that Eobard Thawne did all those years ago. But here, even bigger and better than before, them actually sending in humans into it, opening the portal as they step through for the first time and just see what is essentially an alien barren world. Now, not alien in the sense of like there's other creatures there, but potentially, as we might see in a second, but this place, this land, this other dimension, if you will, the red energy, the red matter, as we keep getting glimpses of, just spewing all across the sky. It's like it's infused into this place, it's living. But no, not just that, that's not the big bombshell here. I mean, it is kind of, you know, they finally stepped through on the other side where this energy originates from, but what's really interesting here is, no, they're not even the first to do so. Us seeing a giant alien ship crash landed here who knows how long ago, because in a universe where there's plethora of different alien species and intelligent life out there in the universe in different galaxies, it will make sense that the humans, even though they are intelligent here on Earth, aren't the first to crack into whatever extra dimensional energies permitting through the universe, through this absolute universe. We know this is a big deal though, because all of this tech that they harvest from these aliens and crash ship here, this is the same tech that they're using to reverse engineer to give the rogues their powers and abilities and weapons, whatever have you. They're making real progress with this stuff, though Barry still in this moment says that's none of his business. This isn't the reason why he signed up and why she brought him here in the first place. He wants to go in now for the first time to start actually harvesting whatever this living energy or red matter that's all throughout this barren wasteland. Barry even going as far as to say that the super soldier stuff and the alien technology is supposed to be the cover story, that Eleanor has lost sight of their work here, her grandfather's work, which of course, and rightfully so, she just blows up at Barry saying, how dare you say that? I've dedicated my entire life to finishing what her grandfather started. And eventually we will, but you know as well as I do that the red matter, the living energy, is too dangerous to make contact with directly. The alien technology and the specimens are just a sidestep, a boon we never expected, but it does give us and buys us time to study the energy and learn what it's truly capable of before we risk bringing any of that back here into the real world in their sense. But they do have to be very careful or they're going to end up just like her grandfather, destroyed by the very thing they coveted, which I mean any logical, insane person would see that she's right. They just can't rush into us, even though it is very exciting and exhilarating to be on the edge of something new and a incredible discovery that could change humanity. What she said earlier about her grandfather rings the same for Barry. How, you know, the line between genius and madness is very fine and thin, because Barry is obsessed. You know, he knows the risk, but he just doesn't care. He wants to keep going, to dedicate his life to something above him. As even still, him here staring at the machine, thinking about what could be, suddenly he hears something, another voice, some entity calling out to him, something otherworldly, something as in the living energy, the red matter that has been the focal point of everything here. This time it's actually interacting with Barry, as a voice rings out asking him to help me. Us seeing her grandfather appear out to Barry, telling him to stop, that you must stop. It can't be you. You can't venture off and explore this energy. Wally, it must be Wally West instead. Of course, hinting at the fact that Wally is special. He might be the only one to be able to fully interact, and it's almost like the energy chose him. And also, very strangely, the only people we've seen interact with this energy and get dissolved or atomized or get integrated into it were previous speedsters or people who become speedsters in the main DC universe, as in Jay Garrick, Eobard Thawne, and even Barry Allen, as we will see and find out later at his death, if you will. And at the very least, we know Barry isn't fully dead. Well, I mean, his body might be dead in the traditional sense, but ever since he interacted with the energy, he almost became connected to Wally, being able to talk and interact with him at certain points. Even Wally seeing visions of Barry after his quote-unquote death, which points more to the point of Barry, instead of just dying, he got warped and absorbed into this red matter, living energy, whatever you want to call it, fake Speed Force, Darkseid energy, and Wally is the only one so far that has been able to harness it and use it, making him, as Eleanor said before, no longer just the 15-year-old boy that he was previously. Now he is a miracle, because the same accident that killed Barry Allen doesn't have to be for nothing, because Wally West is the greatest success that they have ever had. But that is the end of this issue and the end of this video. As always, if you have enjoyed, leave a like or subscribe if you're new and want to see more content just like this. As always, this was AJ here at The Hero Informer, and thank you for watching.